Hit the lights!
You've discovered the Halfwatt podcast. We want to educate and entertain by tapping into the most trusted source of new technology, the ones installing and innovating it. You, the tradespeople that build from the ground up. Join us as we talk with industry leaders, veteran contractors, and even some young blood.
Welcome aboard. Today I'm talking to Chad German, and Chad, you're from what was the name of the city in Utah?
I am from Salt Lake City, but we moved about 5-6 years ago down to Santaquin, Utah, which is an hour south of Salt Lake City.
Nice. And he and I were just chatting before the show started about Utah. I found it to be a very fascinating place to visit, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. We love it.
A lot of construction, a lot of construction.
Yeah, it doesn't stop here. So
cookie cutter houses, but beautiful layouts. When I was in Salem, they had these subdivisions, and then they were all kid centric. So they had play areas and green spaces, and it was really remarkable. Brand new subdivisions.
Yeah. There's a lot of subdivisions going in, and like you said, they have parks and different things that they've kind of put in throughout the town and the different towns that we have around in the cities.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
So tell me about yourself. So you're a master electrician. So what does that mean as far as for my listeners? What is a master electrician versus?
Well, from state to state, a master electrician is a little bit different. Some states don't even have a master electrician license. Here in the state of Utah, in order to become a journeyman, you have to go through 4 years of school and 4 years on the job training to even apply to take your journeyman test. And then you would take 3 tests, a practical, which is a hands-on, a theory, which is obviously a lot of math and electrical theory, and then a code test. All are pretty hard tests. And then you have to wait 4 years, and then you can take 2 tests, another theory and another code that are more in depth, a lot of load calculations and motor calculations and things of that nature for the code. Theory, it seemed like it was a repeat of the journeyman test. And then you become a master. Once you become a master, then you can own your own contracting company, or you can sponsor somebody else to have a contractor's license.
Oh, no kidding.
So yeah, I have my master's, and I sponsor 2 companies, and then I'm an electrical coordinator at the college, at a tech college here in Utah.
So the tech college is a Mountainland Tech College?
Mountainland Technical College, yeah.
So you're a master electrician, so obviously you're a high voltage electrician. I mean, you're a full journeyman.
Yeah, yep.
I'm obviously a half watt, which is what the podcast is about. So
it's more of the low volt. I would call it low voltage. I mean, if you talk to high voltage guys, I'm a low voltage guy, right? If you're talking about linemen and stuff. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, we deal with, I would say the lowest I would go is 24 volts. The highest I would go, obviously, is 277, 480. I mean, with my license, I can do customer-owned utility, but that's something I've just never dealt in.
Going above 100 volts was never my drive. I'm a former military guy, so I worked with some fairly high voltages there. But once I got out and kind of found my niche, I was kind of happy working in low voltage. It wasn't a big deal for me. I kind of enjoyed it. So of all of the stuff that you do, what is it that drove you into this industry? How did you get your start?
Well, I'd actually worked for the LDS Church, obviously in Utah. That's pretty prevalent out here. So I worked for the LDS Church for 10 years. When my wife and I first got married, we got married fairly young, and I just found the kind of took after the same steps as my father and his father, which is you find the first job you can find, and you budget around that, right? And you just kind of work off that. So my dad did kind of try to push me into the trades, actually the electrical industry, but he was a horrible salesman, right? He's like, it's 4 years of school and it's 3 hard journeyman tests. And then, I'm like, that sounds horrible. So I was working washing windows for the first little bit at the church office building. And then I moved into the the mail room down there at the LDS Church office building, sorting mail and doing a lot of the machines. And then we had a son that was born with some challenges, and my wife and I sat and thought about it and prayed about it and decided that I needed to change careers. And so it just seemed like every time I would talk to somebody about this scary thing called changing careers, electrical just kept coming up. I was a personal trainer, training a guy that was an electrician, and he said, I hate my job. I can't get all the protein in that I need to do for my bodybuilding show, but my boss is hounding me to pull wire. I go, what do you do? And he goes, an electrician. I'm like, I've been thinking about doing that. So then he told his boss, and his boss called me and offered me a job, and I took actually a pretty big pay cut to start. So I got into the trade at 29 years old.
Good.
And at the time I felt like that was really old, but now that I am a coordinator at the college, I see that we got anywhere from 18 years old all the way up to, I've got a 65-year-old student in fourth year.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. So it's all over the place. And I kind of put that down to the fact that it's a career. There is a difference between a job and a career. What I was doing before was just any job I could find is what I would stick at. This is a career. I can get fired tomorrow from the school and go into the same, keep in the same career path and rope a house or go do a Walmart or something of that nature.
So that's critical for the listeners to hear, because when I do my teaching, and I'm a teacher as well, I tell them, I ask all the students, where do they come from? Before you got into this trade, what did you do? And find out you got former military people or mechanics or people that worked in the food industry or what have you. And then inevitably in every single class, I'll have people who all came from the same background. I've had people with degrees in physics come through. I've had a guy with a master's degree. Matter of fact, I work with him. A couple other folks. Matter of fact, I had a student who was who had a degree in physics who gave me some analogies to use for teaching that I still use.
That's awesome.
And then I credit him, credit that student for showing me that, because if you have somebody gifted enough to know physics and that can help you visualize what I couldn't visualize and give me an analogy for it, and I'll that's why I put so much emphasis on my students to teach me what I don't know.
And I find it interesting because sometimes the best stuff as a teacher, your best material actually comes from, in my case, sometimes it's the slow learner, first year apprentice that doesn't quite grasp what you're saying, and then he'll ask like a very simple question that makes you realize how complex you are teaching it. Right. I remember teaching reactance. I don't know, with inductive circuits, and this kid, he just had his head down on the desk and he wasn't really paying attention. And I was talking about when you apply voltage to an inductor, then you get a counter EMF that comes back and pushes back, which is a second opposition of current flow. And this guy got all excited and raised his hand and was like, Mr. German, I have something. And I go, what? Like he'd never talked. So I've taught him for 2 years. And he said, so this would be like running through the beach without your shoes on to cause resistance to get your big calves, and then all of a sudden a big guy comes out of nowhere to hold you back to add extra resistance. That would be that second opposition. And I'm laughing, but at the same time, that's a great analogy.
That's a great analogy.
When I teach that, that's what startup current is, right? When you start a motor, everybody thinks of it as a big push when you start a motor, the inrush current. Well, the push would be voltage, so they're incorrect. It's actually that you're running a lot more freely until that second opposition of current flow, being reactance, comes in and opposes you from running. And so the student that struggles comes up with a great analogy that opened the whole class.
That's a thing of beauty. I may even steal that from you, because we teach the capacitive reactance and inductive reactance in about the third week in on one of the classes I teach, and I kind of gloss over it, but I use the electromagnetic door holders.
Oh, right.
Where you charge them up, but there's not a alternating current, so they just stay. Those flux lines bow out and stay right there. And then when you pull the power, they collapse back down, and you get that surge back through the system
Right.
And it can cause chatter and stuff like that. And I always like try to, I'm a ham radio guy and I have a whole lot of radio experience, and a lot of my analogies kind of center around that.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of serendipitously teaching them radio fundamentals as well and the physics of that. And so I'll use a lot of my analogies from radios. I'll say, well, look, if I've got an antenna that's this long and the radio is actually looking for an antenna that's this long, I'll add inductance to it.
Yeah.
And it electrically lengthens it, or I'll add capacitance to it and it will electrically shorten it.
No, that's cool.
It's really cool. And every once in a while, I'll have a student, I can look out in the classroom and get a student that's really locked onto that. It's like, yeah,
we do too. Our school is the largest program in the state of Utah. We have, I think it's 400 and something students, 20 something teachers.
Wow.
And we try to get about 24 students per class. We got a huge waiting list. Obviously you saw the construction here, so everybody's trying to get into the trade and do the electrical thing, and pay right now for electricians is really big. So I see those guys. In fact, there was a student that came in and goes, I am horrible in the field as an electrician. I just don't get it. But I think I'm going to go to electrical engineering because I love this stuff in second year. And so some people will come through the program, like you're saying, some people come to the program and they don't have a career, or they've had a dead end career. And so that's why we get so many people coming at different ages, because they want to get something that's stable in the electrical industry.
Or they just got pushed out of their other industry because you can't outsource what we do. You just can't.
We get a lot of computer, when I
go. We do too.
And it's like, I'm an IT guy that hated it. I got a degree in IT and I hated it. I need to move around. So
we have a lot of similar backgrounds, because when I talk to my students, it's like, what'd you do? Well, I was an IT guy for a long time, and then wham, you're on the field because your job got outsourced to Bangladesh or something.
Yeah. I find that our best, I don't know if you find the same thing, but our best students are the adults with kids. These 18 to 22-year-old student, I shouldn't call them kids. And everybody's different, a little bit different. But, when you have your own children and your own responsibilities and you've just left a career to get into this, you're generally all in. I was that way, to where you see like other guys that are in their 20s that just kind of show up and play the game of school, and they're
do
not
the bare
there
minimum.
They're just trying to get an A. Like if I'm teaching grounding and bonding and a guy's over there doing his homework so he doesn't have to do it when he's home with his wife, he's newly married. And then the next day, what did I go over? Like, I don't know, but he's getting an A, and that's all he cares about. And the other kid's paying attention, but he didn't have time to do his homework, and he's got a C. But he understands everything he teaches.
But he's got it all figured out.
Yeah. So that grade number, and I just find education fascinating, and I never thought I was somebody that was a C student at best growing up.
I was too in high school. I was terrible in high school, absolutely terrible. The classes I liked, I was all into photography and stuff like that. It wasn't until I got in the military, I was in the Navy, and they threw me in technical school, that it opened my eyes. And everything I ate, everything I put my hands on, I just ate voraciously. Like I had to have it. I had to know it, learn it, get into it. And it paid off. I mean, it really paid off. By the time I got out of the military and came to Oregon, because I'm from San Diego, they would accept you in as what they called a JLE, a journeyman limited energy. You could basically take the test and get that. And so I moved into a JLE, but I didn't have all the right qualifications to go into what we are now. They broke us into life safety and non-life safety limited energy people.
Oh, gotcha. So
I did the class and got my life safety endorsement, and I've been there ever since. I've just never looked back. But it is, you're exactly right. If you're really all in, and this is a career for you, it does not. It's been the most lucrative thing I could have ever done. I don't have a college degree.
Right.
I mean, most of us don't. We just.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the coordinator of the program, and I would have never. I mean, I struggled for the first couple years. I mean, I'll be honest. I probably struggled through all 4 years, but one thing through the the program. I had a lot of learning disabilities and different things growing up that, I mean, I remember in school that was kind of, once you get labeled that, you kind of get put in those classes. And we moved a few times and they lost records. And so they just kind of threw you into those programs. They didn't really have a lot of self-belief when it came to education. But through our program and through putting myself through it, I learned how I learned. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and
yeah,
now
you learned your learning styles.
I learned my learning style for sure. And it takes me a little bit longer to learn things than most people, and I find that to be true. But once it's there, it sticks. And I you know, one of our teachers that works with me, he sat with me in class, going through all 4 years of school, and he would sleep through school, wake up and pass the test with 100%. And I would be studying for hours to get a 75. Well, now on the flip side, I've got half the code book memorized. If you watch my videos, I can just throw the codes out there, and then I just find it fascinating now. But when I was going through school, I was playing the game of survival, trying to just get that A, like all these students that I have, like just had my nose just out of water so I could breathe. And now that I have to know what to teach students, I know how I learn, and I wish I could apply that back when I was younger.
So do you, with your students, do you talk about because I talk about the 3 different learning styles of kinesthetic, audible, and visual. It's usually one of the first slides I put up to just discuss it so that everybody says, look, and I give an example. I had a woman out of just an area south of here come in and teach us when I worked up at a hospital before, and I worked there again. And she showed up with a container full of toys. And she made every electrician in the room, and there were high and low voltage folks in there, grab a toy. And so I had like Gumby or Pokey or something, and I put it on my desk. And 10 minutes later, she stopped her lecture, and 4 or 5 of the electricians had their toy in their hand. And they were listening to her, and they were manipulating the toy. And she stopped, and she said, look out there and see those gentlemen playing with that toy. Those are kinesthetic learners. Right there. Yeah. And she identified it right off the bat. And it wasn't an embarrassment to them. They just looked up and they're like, what? And she goes, they're manipulating their toy while they're listening to me. That helps unlock their brain.
Oh, yeah.
And I doodle when I'll make notes. If I'm listening, because I was a manager weasel for a long time, so I would listen to go to these meetings, and everybody would drone on about stuff. So I'd write the minutes for the meetings, and then I would write all my little side notes and keep myself busy. And when I get done, I could recreate all the minutes, the way they actually happened. My notes were illegible. They were only legible. I was the only one who could read them. Plus, I can't read worth a damn. So,
it's fascinating how certain people. I have an idea for this next year, because I teach right now. I teach 3. So we have 1A, 1B, that's first year, 2A, 2B, that's second year. And it goes on to 4A, 4B is the last. So I've taught first year and fourth year for the most part. And then last year I taught second year. And then the goal is I'm going to finish up doing third year, and then I'm going to go straight to admin. I don't want to be admin, but that's what my boss wants me to be. So I feel like my skill set is in the classroom. But one thing is I got kind of lectured the students about playing the game of school. And so this next semester, I kind of have a vision. I'm not sure how I'm going to execute it, where I'm going to find those different types of learners and have them be together, and then kind of facilitate education in a way, like have them work together on, here's my concept that I'm teaching you. You guys help each other on how you would learn this, and let's have a representative come up and teach it. And because I find
that's fascinating.
Teach themselves better. Like if I get up and just throw out codes, and there's 2 guys that'll pay attention, are super excited. Everybody else is kind of like, or like you said, they're doodling, trying to pay attention. So they usually get it once I break them into groups after a lecture and say, now work this sheet together, or come up with these things to chat. Like I'll challenge this table, go against that table. You guys come up with 5 questions off of what I just taught to trump the other table. And the other table, you do the same for this table. And the winner, to see how many questions you guys can outdo each other on, you guys will get all candy bars.
I may steal something like that from you, because I do a series because I teach a block of 12 weeks. And then it might be the same course. I might teach it Monday and Tuesday nights to 2 different groups of students, but it's the same course. It's the same course material I've been teaching for a decade. And it's old. It's not modern. It's not what we want, but it is what we have. And so I do a couple of weeks of what we call Stump the Chump, which was based off of a Navy game of sitting in front of naval warfare publications and between ship to ship asking each other questions off that pub and seeing which ship or which group of people in the ships could answer quicker. Yeah. And so if I had a warfare pub, we would say, what's the missile associated with this platform? And, someone would guess it. So I brought that into the classroom, and that's what we do. But I have them write a question, and then we all try to answer it. And I'm trying to beat the students, to the punch. So if someone puts a question up, then I'm looking at it as well. And if I get the question first, I'm not going to answer them. I'll wait till another student answers it. But I'll at least say, okay, I got the answer here. And once we all agree, I'll say, okay, so what was your method at finding the answer? Because that's the key in the code, is knowing where to get the answer to the question, not knowing at all. I mean, you can if you take the time like you did. But for these students, it's just, what tools did you use? Did you use the index? How did you get to where you got to the answer?
Yeah, that's kind of one thing we do too. With the code book's so hard to play games with the code, because the code's kind of a boring, and in electrical, it's like, if I'm sitting here teaching in the residential codes, for an example, 210.52 residential receptacles placement in residential, and a guy's working and all his company does is hospitals. He's just
Good point.
He's just sitting there buying his time, but he has to go through it to get his journeyman test. And on the other end, when we get to hospitals and you got guys that all they want to do is rope houses, they really don't care about those critical units and the patient care areas and
the different branch circuits you have to have, like life safety and critical and equipment.
So I try to constantly tell the guys, like, hey, this is I find true all the time, is where somebody is right now in class. 100% of the time I find that student 10 years later, and they're in a whole different part of the industry than what they thought they would be.
A whole different realm. Yeah.
And, if somebody I remember my teacher saying, you'll never do a load calculation, but I'll have to teach you how to do it. Well, now I teach Article 220 and do load calculations, and companies call me to figure out how to do them all the time.
I bet.
And so I always say to my students, like, hey, I'm not going to ever tell you you'll never use this, because I have to know it. And my teacher taught me that all the time. So,
and I've worked with some high voltage guys that did that, especially, motor plate, look at a motor plate or look at a transformer and tell you how they're going to wire it and all the different factors in it. And I was like, woof, I make fun of high voltage folks, but in all seriousness, I couldn't sit down and do what you guys do. There's just no way, I just don't, I wouldn't have the skills. I'd have to go back and learn them. I'm so pigeonholed in my thing.
I did a post on my Instagram page just with the right triangle. And I said, how often do you guys use trigonometry in the field? Let's be honest, because our curriculum goes really, really deep into that stuff. And the book that we use happens to be more for utility company. So there are some things that we go a little too deep and a little off our scale. And it was amazing to me how many guys said they use it on a daily basis, obviously to bend pipe. They use a lot of trigonometry. And then one guy said, well, I had to clean up some power factor in a factory that had a bunch of inductive motors. The power factor was all off, so I had to learn how to wire up capacitors. And
wow,
there's a guy in our industry that's got a really big name. I won't say it, but he came in and goes, well, you wouldn't have to do that. You could just call the manufacturer. He would tell you what you would have to do. You don't have to sit there. And he goes, why? It took me 5 minutes to do the math.
Nice.
And that's when it hit me, like, man, knowledge is power.
You've really got a good program going there. I mean, really.
Yeah, we're really trying to do our best to change it up. The hardest part is we only have so much space. We have quite a few campuses throughout the different counties that we're over. But because we're a tech college, we have other programs within the college. And so we only get so much lab space. And where we're the largest program in the whole college, we fill buildings up at night because it's a nighttime program primarily. and we have one lab in each building.
Wow.
So it's to get that hands-on experience is really hard. So we're building a lot of boards and different things that have, one thing that I find the hardest, and I don't know if it's the same with you guys, and is the terminology from the field compared to the technical terminology in the code book. For an example, Smurf tube.
Mm-hmm.
In the code book, it's not Smurf.
It's not Smurf tube, but everybody knows what it is in the real world. Yeah.
So when you're trying to look up Smurf tube in the code book, you'll never find it. And so I find that the students, just that little thing itself will just baffle them. So we've got a board or multiple boards that have all the different types of raceways with the technical name and then the trade name on the side of it, so they can physically see it. Yep. And just even if it's something simple like that, that makes a big difference.
That is huge. That's really a good idea. But the thing you're experiencing, I've seen elsewhere as well. We're at the same point where we're busting at the seams. I teach for 2 different groups here, and what we combine the students, and then I teach at a community college. And adjacent to that building that we're in are plumbers now. They brought the plumbers over and the linemen. So during the day, it's mostly linemen from the local utility here. And then at night, it's us and plumbers. And we're out of room. And plus they do a couple other night classes there. And we have a pretty good sized lab. I can't complain about that. But we're growing to the point that, the idea of getting our own space is tempting. And then not handing over that big wad of cash to the college to support us. But at the same point in time, to get lease space and then to build it out, is a big expense. Yeah. And I'm certainly not in a position to help them, juggle that money. That's not my cup of tea. So,
yeah, that's a hard thing. I mean, we're run by the state of Utah. Mountain Land Technical College we're under an umbrella called USHE, Utah System of Higher Education. So Utah Valley University, Utah State, all those universities kind of fall under the same umbrella as us. We're higher education, but we're a tech college to where they're your university. So, so the state allocates a lot of money. We get paid by the taxpayers, but we do have like the union, the JATC here in Utah. We have the IEC in Utah. What
we have too, and we teach I teach for both of those groups, JATC and IEC. Yeah.
And then we just got one called WICA that got accepted by the state of Utah.
I heard about them coming for a while. I sat on the A&T committee for IEC for about a year, and I heard about them for the first time just recently, coming out of California and I think Colorado.
Yeah.
They seem to have a pretty fast-paced program, if I understand it.
I do believe their program operates a lot like the JATC, where you take time off of work and then you go to school for 2 weeks during the day, and that's a semester.
Yeah.
So it's
that's the whole thing.
That sounds awesome if you could do it. I just don't know any of my students that could sit in a class for 8 hours. You know what I mean? Ours are 3 hours. I don't know. Maybe if it was fast tracked like that, it would work.
Maybe, but that intensive training over a period of a couple of weeks it seems to be working for them because they're growing.
Yeah.
And I know in California where their requirements are pretty stiff, they're holding their own down there. So
one of my buddies on Instagram, he owns Humboldt Electric, and his account on Instagram is Humboldt. He was telling me that his best guys go to school at WICA.
No kidding. So maybe that intensive training, it's like an immersive training. It might be a different way to look at it, because we spread ours out over 12 weeks, and it's once a week. 4 hours a night is the maximum. Depends on what all happens. But it's a lingering thing. Where when I was in the military, if I took a course, I took a intensive, bam, 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 4 weeks. And you get done, and all you're thinking about is what you just did. And then I can still. I tell my students this: one of the best classes I ever had, and one of the best instructors I ever had, was teaching a 4-week class at the end of a 12-week maintenance on this piece of machinery, piece of equipment. And I got to the end of the 12 weeks, started this 4-week program, and the very first night, he starts talking about how data loads into the computer and how it moves through the system. And there was only 4 of us in the class, and I just shook my head and went, oh crap, this again. Because I didn't understand it the first time it was taught. And I was an all analog guy. I'd come from tubes and transistors and, old school stuff to this digital, and I just couldn't make the transition. This guy said, he told the students, he goes, you 3 can take a break if you want. I got to talk to Petty Officer Brooks here for a little bit. And in 20 minutes, that guy filled in the holes in my head from, really, it was almost 16 weeks of training in 20 minutes. And he just went, awesome. You're not the first guy who's come here with this problem. Let me show you what you're missing. Wham. And I was just like, holy cow. So, the right instructor at the right time with the right persuasion just did it. I mean, he just opened up my mind. At the end of that class, the final we had was 5 questions in 7 hours. And it took me 7 hours. It took every one of us 7 hours to answer those questions. Wow. And we went through every single publication that machine had. You had to know your way. You had to work your way through every single book in order to answer those questions.
That's intense.
It was intense. And I can still remember, the intensity of sitting down, and I was a smoker at the time, and taking a break 45 minutes in going, oh my God, this is insane. And walking back, and at the end of the class going, I feel like I've mastered something, and getting out to the fleet and then being able to use what the guy taught. As a matter of fact, I had him re-enlist me. I mean, it was that attached to his teaching style, and I stole his teaching style. Hey, Mike here. I just want to do a quick shout out to all of our listeners. Now listen, it's been a wonderful couple of months getting the show moving, and we have seen a ton of growth, right? You guys are doing your part. People are downloading. You're telling people. That's super important to get this podcast on the map, okay? We've got good lineup of folks coming in the studio, and the biggest thing that I want you to know is that I want to hear from you. You, the person listening to this. All right? You want to be a part of this show? You want to talk about tips and tricks? You want to talk about things that you're learning in the trade? You want to talk about how this has changed your life? You want to talk about stuff like that? Send me an email, okay? It's halfwattpod@gmail.com. And I'm interested in hearing about people who are in the union, and people who are not in the union, and people who are technicians, and people who do alarm work, and people who do camera access work, stuff like that. It doesn't just have to be fire alarm monkeys. It could be anybody. All right? So let's talk about this so that people can realize that this is a career that will change their life.
One thing I find with teaching styles, I mean, being that I go and I do a lot of observations in our course with the different teachers, obviously there's students that, like we talked about, the different styles of learning. But I think a great educator cares if you know it. They don't. Well, we have really good guys. I'll go sit in a class and they're dynamic. They're throwing their hands up. They're presenting it in a great manner. But once that's over, it's like, I taught it, and if you didn't learn it, that's on you. But the real good teachers aren't the smartest guy. And I hope my teachers that are smart don't think that I'm talking about them if they listen to this, but they're all great in their own way. But
chase you down the street.
Some of my best teachers are the ones that, I know on my end, one thing that makes me a decent teacher is because I do have those learning issues. I come at it with when I teach my students, like, hey guys, watch out with this. When you're doing parallel circuits, and you're punching in the reciprocal key, you got to make sure this is what it looks like, the reciprocal of the sum or the reciprocal. If you forget this reciprocal, it's going to look like the reciprocal of the sum. You won't have the reciprocals, and so
I can actually follow what you're saying because I know what you mean.
So it's one of those things, like, if you know where they're going to miss it, and then they laugh because they miss it right after you tell them that they're going to miss it. Like, I did exactly what you told me you're not to. Then you're relatable. Then they trust you. And
so
then it's not about you being
I have a technique where when I teach parallel, I teach parallel series both, but when I teach it, I'll stand up in front of the whiteboard, draw it out, or up, have a slide projector up. And then I'll ask them for the the numbers they want to put on the resistors, let's say, and
Uh-huh.
and I'll take them from them. And so whatever they give me is whatever we do. Whatever equations they give me is what I'm going to use. If you give me E equals MC squared, then that's the equation we're going to use. We're going to be here for a month, but by God, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So when I say, what's the equation we're going to do for parallel? What do we want to do? 1 over 1 over,
Yeah,
one
because there's
R1.
multiple. Yeah.
Exactly. Or there's another equation we could use if I've got two resistors of, various. So I put the onus on them to give me the equations, and then I do the math in front of them. And we do it together. I say, okay, we're going to do this here. What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? We put it all together. And then when we get done, we double check it to make sure it's right. And if I can vapor lock in front of a class full of students, then you can vapor lock on your test and figure out how to work your way back out of it. And that's just because if I can stand here in front of you guys and look like a fool, but together we are working our way back in and out of this mathematical problem because these are equations, not expressions. They all have to balance out.
Yeah.
And that technique has saved me loads of intensive after school time with a student that hasn't quite got it. And if they don't, then I'll just write up some basic problems on a sheet of paper and say, do these, and let's come back and talk next week.
Yeah.
And it's like that. So your technique is super valid. I love it.
Yeah, and I've done your idea too, or like having the students, like when I teach voltage drop, I go to a student and say, what are you working on? Lights. Okay, well, where are you working on those lights? In an auditorium. Okay, how far away are those lights from the source? 500 feet. Okay, what size wire are you pulling?
There you go.
Number 12s. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be weird. What's the amperage on those lights?
Let's do some math here.
Amps, so he'll go 20 amps because it's got a 20 amp breaker. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be really funny. And then they get confused. Well, that's not what's going on at work. And I'm like, well, chances are you don't have 20 amps on that circuit and that you're not 500 feet away. So let's change some of this around and figure out what you really have going on.
That's nice. And that's a practical application right off the cuff.
One of our teachers told me when he does the voltage drops, he brings different hats and he has them write, the different numbers from the formula. So he'll have all the circular mills in one hat with different sizes that the students write down, and then the different amperages, different lengths, different voltage drop percentages. And then he has one person from each table pull one of those out, and then they build to see what would happen on that circuit.
Oh, nice. That's really cool.
And I'm like, man, that would kind of open everybody's eyes.
So,
you know what I mean?
So your techniques of teaching and the techniques that your teachers are using are really cutting edge. I mean, you guys really are on the cutting edge of this. Seriously.
Yeah, a lot of it's coming from our the director of apprenticeship programs. His name's Cliff Caring Campbell, and he's a educated educator, if you will. He was a vice principal. I know he's got a master's degree in education from Brigham Young University. And he says, as long as you're assessing for learning and they're learning, I don't care about that grade. Like if a guy's got a 70, you have to have a C+ in our school to pass.
Okay.
So if you got a 74.6 and you didn't get that 75, we're all like, hey, let's go reteach that student a concept that they don't get. And then when they show you that they can get it, why can't we then pass them? It doesn't have to be this passing on a test, because testing anxiety is a real thing. Now, the only part that scares me about that is they have to go past the big boy test at the end of this whole program.
That's true.
Confidence is key when taking the test. And if you learn how to just do problems, you don't really know why, right? And so they're trying to build their confidence as they go through the program so that they want to learn, and then they can learn how they learn and prep for tests properly. So it seems to be working. I mean, there's always kinks in the wheel. With the program that large, there's still a lot of students that like to play the game of school, and a lot of teachers that like to just click through PowerPoints and do their time, because they're part-time teachers. All of our teachers are guys in the field that teach at nights, except for 4 of us are full-time.
Oh, so you're actually doing this. I mean, that's all you're doing. You're not out jerking wire at all anymore. Because I'm one of those. I have to work during the day and then teach at night. We don't have any full-time teachers in this group yet.
So we're as of a year and a half ago, I got hired on. So I've taught part-time. I think I'm going on 6 years. And it was 2 nights a week, and then it turned into 4 nights a week. and then they came up with a lead teacher position that was full time about a year and a half ago. I got that position, and then they hired 2 other teachers, actually 3 other teachers that are full time, because we have a daytime program now too. And then I just in July got promoted to the coordinator.
Oh, congratulations! That's excellent.
Yeah, I have my own little consulting company where I travel and teach, and I was in Mississippi, and one of the students there said, "Chad, do you know what they say about those that can't do teach?" And I go, "Yeah, I hear that a lot lately."
I hear it a lot too.
And then they said, "You know the whole saying?" I go, "No." And they said, "Those that can't do teach become administrators, and then those that can't become administrators become gym teachers." And I go, "Well, at least I know where I'm headed."
I teach this. I say, well, those that can't do, and those that can't, or those that can do, those that can't teach, and those that can't do or teach consult. And I do all that. I consult and I teach.
Yeah.
Because I throw myself right under the bus with it. I do a little bit of consulting and teaching for a company I just left. I was a manager at a company, and I went back to a hospital I work at now as a technician and as a journeyman, just to bring their apprentice up to speed and work on the systems and just focus, because I'm hopefully I'm at the apex of my career, not the nadir, but
yeah,
I want to start to look at where I can, like quit or retire or whatever that is. I don't know what that is. I never thought I'd ever get this old, so I'm kind of shocked I got this far. And so I'm looking at that point, and my goal is to teach my apprentice everything I need to teach him so that he's completely dialed in on the system and how to program and how to maintain it. And then I can easily transition out, and I know that I've encapsulated this. I'm done. Like, I feel like I've accomplished it, and it's kind of a driving force for me at this point. And not being in management was nice to be able to just go back and work on the technical aspects of, especially this is a huge system I'm working on. It's a gargantuan simplex system, so it's got a lot of nuts and bolts and pieces to it, and it's definitely daunting. I've definitely had days where I've considered I may have made a career suicide decision here, but I didn't. It was just one of those moments. But the former company that I left said, "Well, come back and teach us." So now I teach a troubleshooting course there and help them write it, and it's PowerPoint based, so death by PowerPoint, but I ad-lib in between the slides and give them practical examples.
Yeah. A lot of my consulting that I do a lot of continuing ed. Here in Utah, we have to have 16 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Mm-hmm. And because when I started my little Instagram thing, I like to think that it was a smart strategic idea to come up with Utah Electrician, but it was just, and I think somebody else had a page called Detroit Electrician, so I made mine Utah Electrician, mm-hmm. but it's made me kind of a staple here in Utah. And so I get a lot of jobs from private companies that bring me in to teach continuing education and do stuff for those companies. I get it. Yeah. And that's all PowerPoint based. It's just hard to travel with boards and hands-on stuff.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And I'd go teach at the Utah National Guard or up at Texas Instrument up at the point of the mountain there in Lehi, and the Utah State Prison and the Gunnison Prison, and then the private companies. It's so all over the place. There would be no way for me to teach, have hands-on. So mm-hmm. a lot of that is definitely lecture based, and it's 8-hour classes. So
nice. But you're teaching the continuing ed, and then they can use that because you're a certified instructor, then they can use those hours for their licenses, which is a good idea.
Yeah. So after you get done with your schooling, you have to do continuing ed. So when you're going through school, you don't have to do it because you're in school.
Right. And we have those requirements too. I have a license, and I have a couple licenses in Washington too, and I have to, and NICET. So I have all this CE I have to do for each one. I can do my continuing ed in Washington, which is 24 hours in 3 years, get that done, and then reciprocate 8 hours down to Oregon, which is all they require. And keep the license there, and then
is that 8 hours a year that you have to do?
8 hours, I think, in 3.
3, okay.
Yeah, don't quote me on that. I think it's 4. It's 4 It's 4 code change and 4 code required or something like
Yeah.
that. It's a very
They changed a
minimal
lot of
requirement.
stuff in the 2023 code.
Did they?
I've been studying it and going. I
Good or
literally
bad?
had all of Article 220 completely memorized, and it feels like they just got all those code numbers and threw them in a hat and put it's all the same stuff, just got different code
Oh, really?
references in there. So,
Oh,
yeah, the code changes every year.
I'm excited about that. I usually do
my
my CE through Jade is who I've been
Jade.
using, the online. Yeah. And it's been good. I can kind of tailor some of it. My producer uses it too, so it's been okay. But I certainly would prefer to sit down and knock it out in in classroom environment. But
Yeah, a
the
lot of
way that
the
everything
ones
works
that hire
today.
me, it's companies that hire me. So the employees that
Right.
work for them don't even have to go out to get their continuing ed. So I teach at Brigham Young University out here in Provo. Brigham Young brings me in, the university brings me in, and all the electricians that maintain the university,
Sure.
they have them come in. And so it's a really, really big class. And then they bring in food trucks for lunch, and it's actually outside underneath the pavilion with tons of dudes there. So it's a pretty good scenery. And then I go to Mississippi every year and teach a company, La Valley Electrical. And they don't require any CEUs or anything out there, but the company just wants to keep their guys
That's cool.
sharp and fresh. And so
we're out in Mississippi.
They're the company's in Jackson, but I go stay with the owner. He's in Clinton, Mississippi.
Oh, nice. I used to live in Louisiana, so I've been in Mississippi quite a bit.
What part of Louisiana?
Baton Rouge.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, I only lived there for about a year. I don't tell people I lived there. I tell people I did time there. And then I escaped, but my family didn't, so they're still down there. So I go back and visit every once in a while. They're all spread out. There's one in Covington, one in Denham Springs, and one in Baton Rouge. So if I go down, I usually stay in New Orleans and just go drive.
How far is Baton Rouge from New Orleans?
It's 60, 70 miles. So
it's
not
okay.
that far.
They took me down, not this last year, but the year before. We got in a train there in Jackson, Mississippi, and took it all the way down to New Orleans. And they had a little company retreat out there, and they invited me, which was pretty awesome. And we had a good time.
It's a whole different world than New Orleans. Baton Rouge is it's now the biggest city. It was not. New Orleans was until Katrina. It may still get to that point again. But Baton Rouge, it's all old. It's so old down there. The history is just 350 years old, and it shows. Like you get on New Orleans is like that. I mean, you get down a quarter, you can see it all, and
that's what I love about all that stuff. Jackson. When I go down to Mississippi, one of the employees lives in Vicksburg.
Yeah, I was going to say Vicksburg is really cool.
Yeah, so I go and he has a little house he bought. The housing prices down there are way different than here, right? So he bought a little house that has he has a nonprofit. So he bought it for the shed because he has a nonprofit helping younger children that don't have fathers to learn how to do handyman stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
And so he bought that with his nonprofit, the house with the they don't call it a shed, it's a big workshop, I guess. So I go stay there, and then he's from Natchez, Mississippi. So last time I went, we drove down the Natchez Trace down there and went down to Natchez, Mississippi, and it's just history. I mean, I became a history buff by
the Civil War stuff in Vicksburg is insane. You could walk out and see it's insane. Like that's where you could still see where the trenches were. I mean, they're kind of filled in, obviously, but
they have cannons and stuff that sit there off the side of the sides of the roads and the embankments that they build up. It's the guy that I go stay with, Chandler, his son Jonah will go with a metal detector and find actual bullets. Yeah. From the Civil War, and they're all over the place.
It's the same thing in Louisiana. My dad worked at a nuke plant up in St. Francisville, and so there was a place, I think it's called Port Hudson. Don't quote me on that, but there's a big battle zone area near that, and they would do the same thing and go out and find. Matter of fact, somebody he knew at the nuke plant found a pistol still wrapped in grease and wax paper.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was essentially brand new. It fell off the wagon or fell out of the carton, and that was it. And he discovered it with a metal detector. Yeah, this was back in the 80s.
It's probably worth a ton.
That's crazy how,
pocket knives and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, Mississippi is definitely, they constantly tell you, yeah, we're the poorest state in the nation, and you can feel it, you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of gas stations that have trees and stuff growing out of the center of the gas station. We don't have that here. You saw, like, here in Utah, they take care of everything. So
it's definitely one of the cleanest. The only cleaner city I've been to is Singapore. I'll be honest with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Singapore you could eat off the floors in Singapore, but that's they also have some pretty draconian rules. So, but yes, I was the amount of graffiti I saw in my trip. Now, mind you, I was basically on the freeway most of the time, was minimal.
Uh-huh.
Like I saw a little bit in Provo, and that was it. I mean, there's parts of Portland that you can't even find the walls anymore. So it's just the nature of the beast,
Yeah, and I think homeless in any major city is getting, I don't know if you say out of hand, but like like I was just in Austin, and you walk down the street and it's just filled with homeless people everywhere, and a lot of drugs and different things happening right in front of you when you're walking. I don't go to Salt Lake often, but before I became full-time at the school, I was running a large multifamily project downtown Salt Lake, and there was a little bit of that, homelessness. So I think that as much as I want to praise it, we take care of the streets. We, they mow the little easement lawns, and they pick up the trash, but there's still little tent encampments and parks and different things that we try to.
At least you're trying. And they're starting to make a change here, which is nice, because a lot of the businesses are just like, we're done with this, fix this problem, because they're used to 5 years ago it was a different story. So it's just totally different. So I like if you ever go back to Mississippi or Alabama, there's a battleship that you can visit in Mobile. There's a big static ship display that you can go to that is one of the few battleships that you can go into the turrets on and see how the big guns, the 16-inch guns, all worked. Cool. It's really cool. And I always encourage people, if they're down there, to it's not that far. If from New Orleans, it's pretty, it's just due east a little bit, maybe an hour or so. It's totally worth seeing. Yeah. I'm kind of a Navy guy because I spent all that time.
Yeah, for sure. My grandpa was a Navy guy. So
no way, really?
Military, that's all I know, because Grandpa would tell us stories, and he was in World War II. And
and he would talk about it. That's good.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with my students talking about World War II because of the change in technology, which I attribute to the war, the radar, and although the last couple of books I've just finished up, I polish off a book a week now. It really started before World War II. It's just that World War II kind of made it all happen quicker, so to speak. And so I tell my students that, I share with them, the history, because I'm kind of a history buff, of how all these things came about, and how a lot of that technology is still in use today. You like teletype. I say that TTY is still on your iPhone. I mean, if you go to the hearing impaired section of your iPhone, you'll find teletype. It's still here. It hasn't ever left.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I try to basically, I'm moving my hands, gesturing here, but you're on video. So I just try to encapsulate all these different technologies and show them that, hey, this is not that hard to get your head around if you start to look at it from the historical perspective and really see how it was applied and how you can apply it. How you can actually read about it and go, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
So you also do physical fitness, it looks like. So do you still do that? Do you still coach people and
the personal
training
stuff? No. that was a passion of mine that was, I would say, a big waste of my time back in the day.
Oh
But,
no.
working in, I feel like I have a lot of passion,
Mhm.
a lot of drive. And back then when I was working at the LDS church in the mailroom, I feel like maybe I was looking for something a little bit more. So I was actually a competitive bodybuilder,
Oh wow.
and I lifted weights, and that was my thing. And so, um, the only reason I say it's kind of a waste of time is because I keep thinking I should have had this career years in advance, but I was too busy trying to get big biceps, right?
Right, right, right.
And now it's a little bit different. I look at it different now because now I'm in an environment in a college where I've been able to turn off that blue collar, you know, rough, uh, red blooded male, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
from the field. And I grew up playing hockey where it was, pretty violent and different things. And so I think I've got a lot of different texture to me. But because I was able to work at 10 years at the church office building, I think I have adapted really well to this new position at the college.
I think you
But
have too. I mean, you look like you're in your element, and you sound like you're in your element.
yeah, I love teaching. I never thought I would say it, but I love teaching because they really appreciate somebody that
Mm-hmm.
is very passionate about their thing.
And
But
I think you're right. I think the passion, if you have the passion for it, you can't keep it, you can't contain it.
yeah,
It just
exactly.
oozes out.
I have a student right now that's he's got his residential journeyman, which you can get after 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll let a guy teach at the college if he gets that license just the first 2 years because he's already surpassed those 2 years and he's got that first notch on his belt.
Mm-hmm.
And this student's in my class. His name's Tyler Clark, and I mean I have two of them that do Colton as well. But Tyler, like that passion I have, I can just see it. I go to his class when I do observations, and the whole classroom of guys have their hands up and they're super excited. And I'm looking around, going, "Man, I don't get this much engagement." But he's super passionate about the industry and teaching, and I
I
think
love that.
it just changes generation after just you affect so many different people.
Mm-hmm.
So, but where I'm at with the physical fitness now is I find that I kind of struggled a little bit when I got back into sitting behind the desk and doing the stuff I'm doing now. I couldn't figure out what it was that was missing. And my son, Alec, my 15-year-old son, came and said, "Dad, I want to start working out." So
Nice.
I started working out with him and noticed that it really did help me. And it makes sense because I grew up playing hockey,
Mm-hmm.
then I met my wife, and then I started bodybuilding, and then I started working in the field. And my whole life, I have been a physically active person.
Right.
And so it makes sense that when I would go slow everything down and just sit behind a desk that I was going stir crazy. So
Yeah, it's a component in my world too. I bicycle to work a couple times a week, and we do drive. We have a huge campus, but we drive to a certain building. But then my tools go on my back. I carry a backpack full of crap,
yeah,
and put it on, walk the building, do what I got to do, and so it makes a huge difference. And I'm 58, so I mean it's like I need to be able to move, and then when we're not doing that, I'm on horseback, so there's equestrian sports there. But motion is lotion.
yeah, oh, yeah. Well, it's funny because there's a few times I've been pretty stressed out. There's one thing I ran large commercial projects when I was an electrician in the
Mm-hmm.
field. That's what I did, and there's a different type of leadership in blue collar that
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to demand respect, and I was able to do that, right? Because I grew up playing hockey and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff with just my background, to where here it's a revolving door. I can't in electrical I can go wire up a wall and I'm done with it and move on to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Here I'll always have students that are struggling learning. I'll always have teachers that struggle teaching. I'll always have students that don't like how we're doing things. And so I've had to rewire my brain on how to handle problems.
Nice.
And it's still a work in progress, right? Like trying to give people the benefit of it. I'm not the most patient person. I'm not the most polite person all the time. And so, like you just said, you read a book a week, and that was a goal of mine at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of this year, was a book a week. I got halfway through the year. So I got 30-something books in.
I did it as soon as I started podcasting. I actually cut all my podcasts and moved over to audiobooks. Once I became a podcaster, I actually shut down I had a bunch of podcasts I listened to, and I went, I'm going to shut them off. I've already listened to enough of them. I'm going to move back to books. And I just started focusing on this podcast and then reading and then obviously teaching and, all the other ham radio and all the other horses and
yeah the horse thing's awesome. I was talking to some friends. I'm addicted to the stuff on TikTok and YouTube with the horse trimming, the hoof trimming. Yeah. That's an art. That's a real art. Farrier is a real art. The one that comes out and does ours, she runs her own business, and that's. My wife's like, well, you should get into it. I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. I think I'm going to let the professionals. I'll ride the things. I don't mind that. But I find that interesting. So
I can't. I've really enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, for sure. I have
would you come back on at some point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and just to maybe follow up and see where you're at in a few months. And
yeah,
awesome.
That'd be awesome. Well, and then can I share?
Yeah, please do. Go right ahead.
Can I share on my social media that I did this podcast?
I would love it if you did that.
Kind of get you a little bit of traction.
Any forward moment we can get is good, because we're really trying to reach out to electricians and be technically oriented, and I just also like to just chat. Like, I'm just kind of a, hey, how's it going? Sit down and chew the fat kind of guy.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, I would love you to share it if you would. That'd be great.
Yeah, I have some big stuff in the works right now with a few people from social media that maybe will, by the time we come on again, that'll be in full force with some other social media ventures. So. And
I would love to interview them too. I would be honored to have them on board, because we're certainly not limited to half watts. That's not the goal here at all. The goal is to just be somebody who reaches out to our trade and says, hey, this is what we do. We've had some really cool interviews with some people I didn't expect. Matter of fact, last week I interviewed a guy here in town who was an IT. He's a city's IT specialist here. He's the network engineer, and he owns a bookstore. And we wound up like trading phone numbers pretty much. It was like, wow, that was cool, So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I found that we have a lot of the same interests for sure when we were talking to. So
nice. Well, thank you. I'm super happy to meet you, Chad.
Yeah, you too. It was awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Half Watt Podcast. We always want to hear from you, and we encourage you to email us at halfwattpod@gmail.com with questions or even your own stories. Funny, crazy, or praiseworthy, we want to hear it all. You can follow us on Instagram at Halfwattpod to stay up to date on our feed. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and share us with a friend, the best way to help us grow. The Half Watt Podcast is a production of Now Hear This Studios.